Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My cat is meowing while I'm doing the intro. Maybe I should try that again. Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a PhD student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with...
I'm Dr. Kimberly Plomp. I am a bioarchaeologist. I study human health and disease and evolution.
And I'm Dr. Ross Barnett. Worked on Pleistocene mammals and mainly cats.
And if my scheduling is correct, this episode's coming out the day before Halloween, so we're looking at a scary movie today, The Thaw from 2009. Kind of a scary movie, maybe a scary movie.
For little kids, maybe, yeah.
Who wants to summarize this movie?
You did last one,
can.
Kim.
Oh, okay. You go.
Yeah.
No, you go.
No. I've done more than my fair share.
This is your type of movie, though.
You think?
You're the one that made me watch. Well, because I think
I've never been
thought
so
I'd seen it
insulted.
before. Well, I'm just thinking this because you made me watch The Thing, and that's what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I make you watch it? Did I staple you to your seat and show it to you like Clockwork Orange style, or did I just suggest that you watch it?
You suggested that I was missing out and wasn't very cool if I hadn't watched it.
Yeah, I stand by that.
It was peer pressure. Yeah, you're better at it, Ross. You do
You
it.
think? No, I can try, but what will happen is I'll just kind of fade out halfway through when I forget all the action. But I'll give it a shot. So the film is The Thaw, which has one major star, which is Val Kilmer. I think it's from 2009. So I think most folk know Val Kilmer's had some very serious health issues recently, but this is, I think, before those started. So it's the Val Kilmer that's familiar from Batman and things like that. So it starts with Val Kilmer in a tent, speaking directly to camera. He's clearly recording something about, I think, essentially global warming. So he's talking about the threat of global warming, and it kind of intercuts with all sorts of kind of weirdly kind of ominous film clips of people with parasites, sort of framing that there's too many people on the planet. There's discussions taken from what sound like American talk shows about how global warming is a hoax and things like that. And it kind of sets the scene that the kind of main themes of the film are going to be to do with the kind of existential threat to humans of global warming caused by humans. And so the kind of opening place that it's set is Banks Island in Canada, Canadian Arctic Spring. And we see Val Kilmer, who's playing a guy called Dr. Crouppen, with his assistant Jane, along with another guy who I think is called Ed, and a kind of First Nations tracker who is helping them basically track down a polar bear, which is on a small bit of infilled kind of snow crevice on what is a typical kind of high Arctic Canadian landscape of kind of permafrost with a little bit of grass on the top. And so they're sort of stalking this polar bear, which they then proceed to dart. So they fire a dart at it, and that obviously annoys the polar bear, and it rushes for them. And they all sort of start to run away, apart from the First Nations tracker, who is not bothered. But the polar bear goes down. Obviously, there was some kind of tranquilizer in the dart that they fired at it, and they go down to investigate. It's never really explained why they're darting a polar bear. Maybe because it was investigating the site they're interested in. I don't really know. But they go over to where the polar bear was feeding, and they discover that the polar bear was eating mammoth. And then it kind of cuts away to a kind of university lecture theatre where we find out that some students are being selected to go and assist Dr. Crouppen in the Arctic on his research, which is never really expanded upon. We don't really know what he's doing. He might just be out there shooting polar bears for shits and giggles. We don't really know. But they select three. There's Fedi, there's Ling, and there is, I think all the way through this film, I just called them Dude Bro 1 and Dude Bro 2. I can't actually remember what their names were, but they're kind of...
His name is Adam, spelled Atom for some reason.
Okay, that's what it came up in the subtitles, but I thought it was just that he was called Adam.
Yeah, I thought the subtitles were just wrong.
So he was either called Adam or Atom.
That's how it says on IMDb and everywhere.
Oh, right.
People are commenting on
what a
why
stupid
is he named
name.
Atom.
Yeah, what a stupid name. Okay, so those three are selected to go up to work with Dr. Kruppen. Very early on, it's clear that there is some history between Ling and Betty. That's made quite obvious that they have some kind of history which is festering under the surface. Then we also meet Dr. Kruppen's daughter, who's called Evie. She is currently on her way to party down somewhere on the coast. All we know is that she's packed several bathing costumes and she's gone off with her friends, but she gets a phone call from her dad, Dr. Kruppen, Val Kilmer, asking her to come up to see his research. And she clearly doesn't have a great relationship with him as her dad, doesn't give a shit about global warming, or claims not to give a shit about global warming, and his whole kind of research agenda. Oh, sorry. Who's phoning me? That was very unprofessional. Excuse me.
We run such a professional ship here.
I'm going to switch the phone off just because. Yeah. Yes. So he phones his daughter. She's on her way to the beach with her friends. She doesn't really have a good relationship with her dad. We get the vibe of that from the conversation they have. He insists that she comes up to visit his research for reasons, and she doesn't seem particularly keen on that. And then he offers to give her all of her mum's money, and that kind of brings her around. So we also learn that Evie's mother, Dr. Kruppen's former wife, has died recently. And so that's the kind of family dynamic there. Then we switch back again to the Arctic. We discover that the bear has died. Even though they darted it, the bear is dead, and that's weird. And they don't know what's going on. And so that sets up a little bit of mystery and intrigue there. And then it cuts back again to Dawson City in the Yukon, which is a place I've actually been to. And we meet Bart, who is a helicopter pilot, who is in charge of ferrying people up to Kruppen's research site, and obviously has some history with Kruppen and knows his family as well. Okay, so then what happens is the students arrive where the helicopter place is. Bart, the helicopter guy, gets a very terse phone call from Kruppen saying not to let his daughter come up to the research site, that to make sure she doesn't come, which is also very mysterious. But he doesn't really transfer this message particularly well. And so when the students are about to get in a helicopter to come up to the research site, Evie, the daughter, turns up as well. And Bart kind of half-heartedly says that she shouldn't come up. And she gets pissed off and says, well, I'm coming anyway. And so they all get on the helicopter and fly up. And then they have a really kind of supposed to be deep and meaningful conversation about the meaning of sacrifice in terms of what humans are willing to give up to avert or try to avert the kind of coming climate catastrophe that's on its way. And we switch back again to the research site, and suddenly things are not going very well. The First Nations guide has died. We're not told how, but he's being buried. Jane, the assistant to Dr. Kruppen, is not well. We think that others aren't well either. There's puking. There's all sorts of grossness going on, but it's not really explained what's happening. And then, sort of out of nowhere, Jane shoots at Kruppen and shoots at Edward, the other guy, and then that kind of cuts away again. So there's all sorts of stuff going on all over the place. But back with the students, I mean, really, what happens now is just a classic kind of creature feature film. As Kim's already said, this is basically the same sort of plot as The Thing, which really is a much, much superior film. I mean, it's also the same plot as that episode of the X-Files where they go to the Arctic and get infested by parasites. And even the X-Files episode, I think, is better than this. But essentially what happens is the students and Bart and Evie are in the kind of base camp for Krupin's research, where the dead polar bear is. They sort of notice that the polar bear is really rank and has some kind of signs of infection. Bart touches the polar bear that's in the containment lab and gets bitten by something. Freddy sees bugs running around the base camp. What else? Everyone sort of starts to see bugs. Jane turns up on an ATV on like a quad bike mysteriously and is really, really sick. And we see that she has also sabotaged the helicopter so that they can't escape. And essentially the rest of the film is them all kind of arguing amongst themselves. We have kind of classic tropes of the doomed individual that knows that death is on the way and wants to do something to sort of stave it off. So Bart has been bitten by the parasite that was living in the polar bear, and it's kind of taken over his arm, and so he decides to chop it off. That was kind of the high point of the film. I think the kind of arm chopping off scene was quite well done and quite gory, but affectingly so. Freddy and Ling, who had some clear history, somehow managed to resolve all their differences in the space of about 20 seconds and get back to some hardcore Arctic, how to put this politely, the beast with a million backs kind of style, which wakes up everyone else in the camp, which is just really impolite, I think. If you're going to have an illicit affair, then the least you can do is to keep it quiet. But anyway...
I don't know what you're doing to have a beast with a million backs, Ross.
Sorry, that's
It's
just
a beast
a
with 2 backs.
Futurama. That's a Futurama reference. Because there's an alien parasite in Futurama as well, which is called the beast with a billion backs.
Possibly my favorite of the 4 Futurama movies.
It's a good one. Maybe I shouldn't have explained that and then left everyone with the impression that I know something that they don't. I don't know. Anyway, so somehow the Ling gets kind of covered in bites while they're doing it. Freddy essentially gets some kind of Pleistocene STI and ends up like pissing blood, which is not great. Jane, after she's kind of turned up, she gets really sick and they kind of try to quarantine her in a room, even though they've all kind of been in the same space as her. And their quarantine consists of like sellotaping a bit of bin liner over the door, which doesn't really do anything. And so it's really kind of degenerates into just a kind of classic creature feature where everyone does really idiotic things and gets infected, apart from the daughter, and for some time also apart from Dude Bro number 2, the one who's not Freddy, Atom. And so while everything is kind of kicking off and people are dying and getting infected and all the rest of it, Atom and Evie jump on the ATV and try and find the field camp where Krupin and Edward and Jane were all working, which they do within about, it seems like, 5 minutes of screen time. And they look closer at the excavation site where they were working, and they find the mammoth mummy that was alluded to earlier on, that the polar bear was eating. And the mammoth has these massive kind of egg sacs growing on it that are still living, which are identical to the ones that the rest of the group have back at base camp. And so we have a really interesting and quite topical kind of basis for the whole film. The idea of thawing paleo parasites and paleo diseases, which the kind of thawing of the permafrost in the Arctic are potentially unleashing. And so here we have a mammoth that has some kind of horrible disease which has been passed on to the polar bear, which has then been passed on to the people. And it was also interesting to kind of watch this in a post-COVID world, where
Yes.
you have all these people, they're all making terrible decisions, but their kind of main concern is they're all super worried about, or at least the good guys are worried about it getting out into the world. But we kind of know from COVID that at least half of the population aren't really going to give a shit about new diseases wreaking havoc. But we kind of learn a bit more as people are dying. So obviously Ling and Bart and Freddy, they're all super infected and they're on their way out. But Betty is kind of painted as the kind of classic kind of douchey, preppy kind of American teen student arsehole. And he wants to get back and be safe despite all the danger. He doesn't care what happens to anyone else. And so he radios for a helicopter to come and rescue them. And he's determined to get on it no matter what, despite the fact that Evie and Adam are concerned that all that will do is bring the parasite to a bigger population center and allow it to spread. But yes, so I think I got a bit sidetracked there. But so Adam and Evie discover the mammoth with the parasites. They discover the graves of the native guides.
Wait a minute. I never noticed this. Are they called Adam and Evie?
That's what I was thinking.
Oh my God, they
yeah,
are.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Not atom. But it doesn't make sense anyway, because as things go on, that's a kind of dead end. But anyway, so they find the graves, and so they assume that everyone is dead now of the original researchers. That Evie assumes that her father is in the grave and is dead, along with Edward and the guide, and so that's obviously quite difficult for her to take in that she's now without any parents at all. They come back to the base camp. Things have gone worse while they've been away, but they find some more information. They find the camcorder that Crouppen was recording his thoughts on, which tells them that actually this whole thing was planned. This was Crouppen's direct action bioterrorism as a way of trying to directly influence and reduce the risks from global warming by essentially culling the human population by introducing this parasite, which is interesting in a kind of evil scientist kind of way. You don't get all that many evil scientists that want to commit bioterrorism. I think that's interesting. And they also find his field notes, which tells them that the parasite is a vertebrate, which is also super weird because it clearly looks insect-like, has 6 legs and jointed limbs and an exoskeleton. So how it can be a vertebrate,
yeah.
I don't know. And the males are the ones that bite, but the females are the ones that lay the eggs. So as long as you don't get a female on you, you're golden. But if you get a female that lays eggs, then you're done for. So at some point, Betty gets a gun, which is obviously bad news because he's the major kind of antagonist. And he kind of marches Adam and Evie out to the helicopter, and he's about to abandon them or shoot them and leave in the helicopter, which is now coming. But then, out of nowhere, just as he's about to pull the trigger and shoot Evie, Crouppen appears and shoots Betty. But this is just as the rescue helicopter's arriving, and Crouppen's plan is still to get back to civilization and infect everyone because he also has the parasite. He survived being shot by Jane, but he is also infected with the parasite. And so he jumps in the rescue helicopter. He's locked Adam and Evie in the base camp, and he's about to escape. But at the very last second, Adam and Evie break out of the base camp, and Adam goes to jump onto the helicopter to tell them that Crouppen is infected and that they can't leave with him because he will spread the infection. That doesn't go particularly well for anyone, really, because they can't hear what Adam's saying as he's hanging onto the skids of the helicopter. They're going higher and higher. He's destabilizing them. He eventually falls off and clearly gets absolutely smacked into the ground. But also, Evie starts to shoot the helicopter. I don't know why exactly. She knows her dad's in there, but she manages to kill one of the pilots, and he basically crashes into the base camp, which they'd already seeded with gasoline with the plan of burning it to the ground to kill all the parasites that are inside. And so that explosion essentially does the job for them. So that's pretty much everyone dead except for Evie, and she kind of makes her way to the helicopter, which is the last kind of uninfected space that she can get to, and she sort of sits in there. And then a couple of days later, essentially, some more rescue helicopters come along, and she's in a bad way, but they take her back to civilization, and this is sort of the end of the film. We hear some kind of clips on the news about how Evie has gone kind of public with the plan that her father had, that he was going to introduced deliberately this parasite into the population to reduce human numbers, and how she was a hero. And yeah, that's great. And then it kind of cuts away to a separate little kind of epilogue where we find it looks like it's set in the bayou or somewhere in the south of the States, and we see a dog eating a dead duck or some kind of bird, which is dead on the ground, and it kind of zooms in as the dog kind of runs away back to its owner, and we see that it has exactly the same kind of parasite cysts that the mammoth and the polar bear and the poor kids in the base camp had. And so the idea is that the infections are going to start again through this additional vector, a bird that maybe got infected in the Arctic and flew south, and that it's not such a happy ending after all. So I mean, that's basically, I think that's the kind of overall gist. It's a creature feature where the creature is a vertebrate insect parasite that was living in mammoths and has been thawed from the melting permafrost, with a side dish of kind of please take global warming seriously, or else things like this might happen. Kind of Mant style. This film is science fiction based in science fact. This could happen, kind of stuff. And so I think, as a B movie, it's not too bad. It's quite enjoyable. It's not a great film, but
It was short though, which was nice.
it was short, which is always good. And
Yeah.
it wasn't terrible. I mean, it's not by a great margin. It's not the worst one we've ever watched, and it has some enjoyable, interesting parts and lots to talk about. I think because there are some really interesting bits in it.
Yeah, that was a good recap. I knew. See, I would have been like, there was some bugs in the Arctic. People
Not
died.
bugs, vertebrates.
Vertebrate. Sorry.
Yeah, but I got like about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages of notes from it.
Holy cow!
So there's a lot going on.
All right, so we better let you get started on that list then. I didn't find anything scientifically inaccurate about this movie. What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, there's some pretty interesting bits. So, I mean, yeah, inaccuracies. Obviously, I think we've all laughed at the idea that these insect parasites could be vertebrates. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have worked. I mean, there's no reason why you can't get a vertebrate that was a parasite. I mean, essentially things like vampire bats and oxpeckers and things like that are vertebrate parasites. So that's not unusual. But then if you're going to have that, then don't make them clearly have a jointed exoskeleton and 6 legs, which is the insect thing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm not sure what it added to make them vertebrates, though.
No.
Like, it didn't add anything to the movie. Why did they have to call them... the only thing I can think is that at one point he tries to kill them with bug spray and it doesn't do anything. And like, oh, because they're not bugs, bug spray doesn't kill them. But like, bug spray would kill a small mammal if you doused it in bug spray, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not good stuff. I wouldn't go around drinking it.
Like, if you think of Stephen King's Dreamweaver, the thing in there I would have believed was a vertebrate. Right, so it was still that creepy, gross-looking thing, but it was slimy. It wasn't like looked like a maggot rather than exoskeleton.
Yeah,
They could have gone that way.
yeah. I mean, you could have, there's lots of maggoty kind of vertebrate type things. Anything that's like a snake or a Sicilian or all these kind of things.
Ugh.
That was weird.
Yeah,
but I thought it was quite cool that they had They kind of touched on, and this is something I think we'll probably all go into a bit of detail with later on, is the idea of, quite an interesting idea, of a mammoth with a parasite. So this is one of the things, and I may go off on a bit of a screed here, but in terms of the Pleistocene extinctions, the reason why mammoths and saber-tooths and ground sloths aren't here anymore, traditionally there's been sort of 2 camps, which is the kind of human-caused extinctions versus the climate-caused extinctions. And it wasn't until fairly recently that other kind of ideas were floated about. And one of them was this idea of hyperdisease, which is something that was put forward by Ross McPhee and some of his colleagues, which is possibly an explanation for this fairly rapid, widespread extinction of not closely related large mammals, things like mammoths, mastodons, ground sloths, and all these other things, could have been through disease. That if humans or some of their commensals coming into places like North America, which are semi-isolated. There has been contact between North America and Asia through the Bering Land Bridge. But if humans came in and introduced an unknown disease that had rapid fatality, easy spread, lots of reservoirs, then that could be an explanation for the fairly rapid extinction of large mammals.
Yeah.
It's not something that I particularly buy into. There has been a lot of work done on it. Lots of people have looked at disease in megafauna from this time period. So we have looked at things like mammoth bones and rhino bones for evidence of disease, but it's very difficult to find disease evidence when all you're left with is skeleton. Not many diseases actually affect the bones.
Yeah, it has to be a very chronic disease to affect the bones. Either trauma related, so it breaks the bones, or it has to be incredibly chronic, so a long enough process, and the animal has to live with it for long enough that it affects the bones.
Absolutely. It's almost like the kind of diseases that we would see in bone, things that were chronic and long lasting, are almost by definition things that couldn't have caused extinction because they were chronic. Which is a point. We think about in humans the things that cause big mortality in humans, things like malaria, HIV, influenza. These are all soft tissue issues that don't even really leave all that much of a sign in the soft tissues after death.
Yeah.
So this is something that people have done a lot of work on, like Kim says, with looking at chronic diseases in the bones. So we found things like tuberculosis in mammoths and mastodons, that there's clear signs of that as a chronic disease. They've also been a lot of work on kind of DNA using from megafaunal remains to try and find DNA evidence of various viruses or bacteria or things that could have caused it. And so far, nothing's really turned up. And diseases, they're almost like the kind of financial market. They kind of, if they increase in severity, if they become more fatal to the owners of the disease, then they're less likely to spread. So you have this kind of almost like market forces. If something's too lethal, then it's going to not be able to spread very far. And so it won't infect lots of individuals and lots of different species. It has to be sublethal to be very infectious. So the two things are almost in kind of contrast to each other. But it was interesting, I think, that they showed a mammoth with a disease, and that kind of ties into real research. Although the mammoth looked really nice, whereas I've been to Dawson City. I've worked in places where they found mammoth remains and mammoth mummies, and that's not where they're found. They're not found in pristine kind of ice and snow. They're found in the permafrost, which is essentially mud, which is grimy and gross and stinky and full of organics, and so the things come out looking like they've been washed in manure or something. It just looks disgusting. It doesn't look like it does in the film.
And then also, we've been over this before, and I guess it depends on. So Evie said something about a frog, like the frog DNA that allows it to survive the cold, right? Because the idea that the parasite survived the freezing and stuff. But even then, I think, doesn't it still have to be quite a quick freeze and then quite a quick defrost? Does it work with the slow?
Well, I looked into this. So Evie in the film mentions the wood frog, which is an American species, which can survive freezing down to about -2 or -3, because she or I think it's Atom says that it converts glycogen in the liver to glucose, which acts as an antifreeze. But they also produce other kind of chemicals apart from glucose. Things like what? I took a note of this. Urea. So they produce urea at concentrations in their bloodstream, which produces the formation of ice crystals in the cells. So I don't know if it has to be rapid or not, but if as they're saying, this disease is a vertebrate, then yes, all the kind of issues that the wood frog has with being frozen would be the same.
Yeah.
But I mean, in reality, if we're talking about the real world, then the big issues are going to be from things like viruses, which are, depending on who you speak to, non-living. They're just chunks of protein and nucleic acid. You can crystallize them. They don't really require anything except to be kept intact, which is quite feasible in cold conditions for at least a good number of thousands of years.
This is quite similar to the Iceman with Charlie too, because that in that movie they tried to come up with reasons why he would survive the freeze. So they'd said that he was eating something that changed his makeup or allowed him to survive. I don't remember. That's like a year ago now.
It's because he was eating buttercups. There was what's that chemical that was in buttercups, right?
Yeah.
Other coincidental similarities with that movie, they find a frozen mummy in the ice in a remote Arctic research station, but also at the climax, there's a guy hanging from a helicopter who falls to his death, coincidentally.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I thought was so rude too, and I'd be so pissed when he got there and, Val Kilmer had said, "Don't send my daughter up." But he was full on allowing all the other students to come up. Like, what a dick move.
Yeah.
Well, that's why his assistant murdered him, right? Because he told her that he canceled the helicopter, but in fact, he didn't cancel the helicopter. He only told his daughter not to come because he wanted to get the infection out.
It's very much like Aliens when Burke wants to infect Newt and Ripley. I think that's what he was going for there. That these students, expendable students, were going to be his incubators for the disease. Yeah.
So you were talking about viruses, but did you say that we actually have discovered ancient viruses from melting glaciers, right?
I didn't say that, but yeah, that is true. Viruses and even bacteria and other kind of single-celled individuals have been isolated from very old permafrost as well.
Scary.
Is there any risk of a virus coming out of a glacier that could actually infect humans and cause a pandemic? Or is that something that would only be science fiction that we wouldn't have to worry about?
No, I think that's very much in the realms of potential fact. I mean, it depends, I guess, on what's coming out, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are plenty of potentially infectious viruses in the permafrost. That things like, I don't know, things that have cross-species infection, things that would have been able to infect bison and humans, or mammoths and people. I can't think of too many right now, but influenzas, things like you get bird influenzas and livestock influenzas.
Well, there's tuberculosis and leprosy. There's tons of zoonoses. I mean, COVID's a zoonosis. So.
Yeah, I mean things like TB and stuff like that, which are bacterial. Sure, but at least we have kind of some familiarity with these. I think the problem might be with some of the viral things is that viral evolution is really fascinating, and so lots of things like influenzas and other kind of small nucleic acid viruses are very modular. So this is why you have to get a flu shot every year, because the viruses can mix and match the proteins that it presents on the outside of its coat, and so you get things like SARS and MERS and other kind of viruses as well, which are named by the kind of subunits that are found on their coats. And so you can get viruses that are mixes between the coat proteins from swine flus and bird flus and human flus. And so I think these things are undergoing rapid evolution, so that the coat proteins that would have been in influenzas from the Pleistocene would be totally different from the ones now. And all it would take is for a mix-up or a mixing between a modern virus and some of the subunits of an ancient virus, and you'd have something which nothing would have any kind of immunity to, which would be quite scary.
Yeah, terrifying.
We've talked about the biological species concept in other episodes, where we define species as groups of organisms that can interbreed with each other but not with other groups. I think like viruses and bacteria are really useful to think about why that doesn't work, because bacteria as well can, like, different individual cells can swap DNA with each other, and so it makes it really hard to conceptualize what a species is when you're talking about viruses or bacteria or things like that.
Yeah. That has big repercussions for human health as well. So plasmids, the kind of small bits of mobile DNA that can be exchanged between bacteria, of wildly different species often have things like antibiotic resistance genes on them. So that's why once antibiotic resistance has been developed, then it can spread through a whole bunch of different bacteria, and then you have no defense against it in terms of the medicines that will work.
Okay, what page of your notes are we on so far?
That was still page one. Let's have a look.
We're 40 minutes into this recording.
Yeah, I mean, all the way through, I mean, there's not much science in it, but people make just really rash and stupid decisions. So, why was
Fetty
the dead
was the
polar bear?
worst.
Huh?
Fetty was the word.
Fetty, yeah. Oh, yeah, he was the worst at everything. But why is the dead polar bear in the lab, and what are they hoping to do with that? Who knows why? It's just there as a kind of source of contamination.
And so they can see how, because then it gets kind of eaten in front of their eyes from all the bugs, so they can see exactly how dangerous this bug is.
Yeah. The whole issue with Jane, so when she turns up back at the camp, clearly very sick. And
they get up so close to her as she's puking up this weird green stuff. Like,
they're basically like face to face and inches apart, and very touchy feely, which is not really what you want.
No, and even Jane, who knows what's happening, is like allowing this, right?
She doesn't say stay away or anything like that, which is just not cool.
Could be just that we're all pandemic veterans at this point, and it's just like so easy to criticize people's behavior when there's some sort of infectious agent going around.
Yeah.
Yes, but when you're a biologist up there studying like things like that, you have to. These are things that you have in your mind, right?
You'd hope.
Yeah, it's not like she's untrained.
Yeah, and their whole. I mean, they just didn't do things in even a very logical way. So like they've all been up close with Jane. They've all like been right beside her, and then they decide to leave her in the room and put a bit of plastic over the top of her. Where at the same time, Ling, who's covered in bug bites and really ill and puking as well, they don't really try to quarantine her at the same time. And Bart, who's got like a suppurating wound on his arm, is still there as well.
Yeah. Although I like how he said to cut his arm off. So that was his thing, because his arm was infected with the eggs. So he's like, cut it off, which I would probably want to do too. And they do very badly, right? Like it's something that you really want to get done with it the first shot. But
I thought that scene was actually pretty well done.
Yeah, because it is kind of how it would happen, because you don't know what you're doing, right? But then so the arm gets cut off, he's bleeding out, and Atom lights the bad arm on fire and decides, realizes that the fire kills the bugs. But couldn't he have used the fire to cauterize his arm? That's what I would have done.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
Maybe I just would have killed him faster. But I mean, I would much rather die from blood loss than whatever that parasite was going to do to me.
Yeah.
Well, in the end, he died from a morphine overdose, which is probably the best way.
Did they have morphine?
Hopefully. Yeah, they had morphine, remember?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, just give me a ton of morphine. Yeah, because with the blood loss, you'd go into shock and then go to sleep.
I don't know if we mentioned Fetty's worst crime, which is they had quarantined Ling,
oh my gosh,
his girlfriend, and she was screaming to let her out, and then the others got distracted for some reason, so Fetty shoots her through the window on the door, and then claims she asked me to do it when everyone was there listening to her screaming, "Don't shoot me."
Don't shoot me. Well, and he breaks the glass, so now the bugs are out.
Yeah.
And he didn't kill her.
And he doesn't even kill her. Doesn't even kill her.
No, and then he just walks away as she's...
Yeah, he's absolutely the worst. And I was glad he got killed. That was very satisfying. There was some nice bit. I mean, like all these kind of creature features, they have to kind of engineer ways to get them, in danger by getting them close to the bugs, to just give a bit of, a sense of drama to the film. So there's lots of times when they stupidly decide to go in where the bugs are, which they didn't really need to. I mean, like, who gives a shit about his videos and stuff? They want to go back into the lab where the polar bear is and where Jane's body is to get his videos that Crouppen had recorded. But who cares? I mean, nobody's going to be interested in that. They don't know what's on them. For all they know, it could be, I don't know, like 60 hours of polar bear sightings or something.
Yeah.
But what I did notice, which was I thought quite good, was that when Evie goes back into the really highly infectious area to get those, she's duct taped all the joins in her clothes. So she's duct taped around her wellies where they join her shoes. She's duct taped around her cuffs where they join her gloves and things like that. And that just reminded me of when I've worked in clean rooms doing DNA stuff. That's something I used to do as well, as I would tape my gloves, my first set of gloves to my paper suit to provide, an almost airtight seal, so that then there would be no risk of my skin flakes getting into my experiments. And then I'd put another pair of gloves over the top of that as well. But I thought that was a small detail that's not commented on, but was actually quite clever in what is not a not very clever film.
I did something similar one time when I got a tractor stuck on top of a wasp's nest.
Oh, God. That sounds just like this film.
Yeah, there's a swarm of wasps hovering around the tractor, which was still running because I jumped right off of it. So I had to walk home and I got into all my snowmobile gear to get onto the tractor.
Oh, God. Yeah, and were those insects or vertebrates, those wasps?
I believe they were insects.
Oh, dear. Yeah, Freddy's the worst. I mean, I've written down some of his quotes because he's just such an arse. But the one
he kept going back and forth, being like, we have to quarantine everybody, and then be like, no, let's all just go. Let's leave. No, everybody stays. No, let's go. Like, he was the worst.
But one of his quotes that made me laugh was, I don't want to die with fucking bugs in my dick. I can't let that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how serious the film is taking the audience when you have some talking like that. And, in terms of, like Kim was saying, in terms of motivation, it's not clear. There's people vary widely between what their motivations seem to be. Like Fetty at some points is actually quite sensible and altruistic in terms of not wanting to infect everyone, and other times he's shooting his girlfriend in the face. Mm. But also Evie, she seems to be the most. She's the one we're supposed to be rooting for, despite being shown as quite obnoxious at the beginning of the film and quite shallow. But towards the end, she shoots at the helicopter that her dad, that she just recently thought was dead, who's come back from the grave, essentially. She's shooting at the helicopter as it's going away, which doesn't really...
But it's because she knows that he's infected and he's going to infect everybody else, right? He's infected himself.
Yeah, he was intentionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think...
So she's would
any normal person do that? Even if they knew your parent was infected, would you be able to shoot at them?
Well, I mean, she's already got like a troubled relationship with him.
I hope Kim's parents are listening to this podcast as we hear her answer.
If my parents are going to poison the entire world with some creepy parasite just to prove a point, yeah, I'm going to shoot you guys.
Oh, well. At one point, they also mention pine beetles, which is a bit of a throwaway comment, but was quite interesting if you know a bit of background about that. So pine beetles are a beetle that bores into pine trees, which are a real problem in the States, particularly because they
where
damage.
I'm from too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible what they're done to the forest.
So I think they're mainly a problem for commercial plantations. Is that right? Because these are kind of monocultures more or less, and they basically destroy the lumber usage of the trees because they're bored completely.
Well, now when you go through, like when you drive through BC, a lot of the trees are just dead along the road from them.
So yeah, it's a big problem, but it ties in quite nicely to the kind of overarching theme of the possibly pernicious and maybe unthought about dangers of global warming. Is that it used to be that pine beetles were killed by cold winters, and that would halt their spread, and so they wouldn't really be able to expand their populations because they'd get killed off every winter. But with even the slight trend in warmer winters is enough to allow them to not be killed off and to expand year on year, and that's a big part of the problem with their expansion is that the temperature's warm enough for them to just keep going. I think that's pretty much where I got up to in terms of notes. I mean, there's there's lots of interesting side avenues that could be explored. We could talk a bit more about the mammoth.
Yeah.
Because when they find the mammoth, it looks just like it's died, like yesterday. It's still hairy. It's got everything there. But almost all the mammoth mummies that we have don't have a lot of hair on them, because that's one of the things that kind of, it's not that it particularly falls out, but they're kind of going through freeze-thaw cycles. It basically kind of shears the hair off above the skin. And so most of the, if you think about famous mammoth mummies like Luba, Dima, all these ones appear mostly hairless because all the hair has come off.
And they look more deflated, like mummies, not. Yeah.
They've all the water's essentially sublimated out of them, more or less, as they've been kind of deep frozen.
The flesh was also like red and bloody looking, but it wouldn't look like that either. It'd be like they've talked about when there's blood, quote unquote, in a mammoth, it's more like a brown goo, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if there's any, I mean, it should be frozen because obviously it's below zero. It's in the permafrost. But yeah, it kind of looked brown and stringy, and gross. But also the scene where the polar bear is eating the mammoth. I mean, there are well documented occasions where wild animals have eaten parts of mummies of mammoths or rhino or bison or whatever that's come up. So, it's not great, but if you're in dire straits, then mammoth meat is probably edible.
It looked like it had broken into its head to get to the brain, from what I saw. That's what it looked like. It's that hole right in the side of the head. But I don't think that would not be easily done, especially with it still stuck in the ice. I mean, a mammoth skull is going to be pretty thick, especially in that spot. And I know polar bears are really strong, but I don't know if it would be able to bore into it to get to the brain like that. But I guess maybe the parasites had bored out, maybe.
Yeah, that could be it.
We could talk about the increasing amount of archaeology that has to do with melting glaciers, because glaciers are melting so fast, we keep finding more and more archaeological sites in glaciers. I think the most recent one was just in July of this year in Norway. I think it was some large survey of a whole bunch of newly unglaciated areas where they found the one that was going around the news was an arrow shaft that was about 6,000 years old.
Yeah, there's a really great Twitter account which is worth following, called Secrets of the Ice. The handle for it is at Brearchaeology, or BRE archaeology with a K. I think it's spelled in Norwegian, but they show some of the amazing things that they keep finding on these Norwegian ice flows that are melting away. Like Josh says, not just arrowheads, but complete arrows with the fletching still on. Mummified pack horses from Viking times, bits of clothing, bits of wicker work, all sorts of things. It's really worth a follow if you're on Twitter.
Very cool, but devastating that we're losing the glaciers. And then obviously Otzi. So if the listeners don't know Otzi is a Neolithic mummy that they found in the Alps along the border of Switzerland and border of Switzerland and Italy, yeah. And he was murdered from an arrow in his back. Arrow went into the back of his shoulder and neck. And some hikers found him because as the glaciers melted away, he became exposed. And he is now, we have evidence of the clothes that he was wearing. We know what he was eating that day. We know he has tattoos on his skin. I'm sure we've talked about him before. Oh, we watched a movie about him.
We watched the whole movie.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So there. If you haven't listened to that episode, go and listen to the episode that's called something about.
It's called Iceman, and not to be confused with the other Iceman movie, which has a lot of parallels to this one that we just watched.
Or isn't Iceman Val Kilmer's call sign in Top Gun?
I think so.
I think it might be.
I think it is.
There we go. Degrees of separation.
6 degrees of Iceman.
Yeah, it is. Well remembered me. I've just Googled that. I wonder if that's maybe why they approached him for this film then. But yeah, I fairly enjoyed this film. I thought it was a solid B movie. It's the kind of thing that you could watch off a Halloween and just have it on in the background and sort of dip in and out. And some of the kind of gory effects were pretty good. I think the bugs were suitably gross looking in terms of their kind of infection sites. The arm chopping off scene was really well done.
I did not hate my life while watching it. I sat down, I watched it, it was over, it was fine. There wasn't like oh my God moment that's happened quite a few times.
The only character I really felt sorry for was Bart. He was the best character in it, the helicopter pilot. He was nice, and he was really sweet in that he never swore all the way through. Whenever anything bad happened, he was, what was it he said? Jeez Louise, and other kind of really cute sayings. So I felt really bad for him.
After Fetty half-heartedly tried to kill Lynn to put her out of her misery, and then so she's just lying there now with the infection taking over her and a gunshot. Bart, who was infected and going to die anyways, went and laid down with her and held her because he was going to die anyways too.
That's sad.
So sweet. I know, that's a real hero.
But even with only one arm, he still managed to punch Fetty in the face, which was very satisfying.
So yeah, I don't think this movie was that bad, but I would say, like you say, it's a solid B movie, but it's only got 5.2 out of 10 on IMDb. Neander Jin still has 7.7.
Yeah, but that's just like from the 10 people who were involved in making it have gone and done that. No one has heard of Neander Jin. It's only those people.
So once again, we have to call on our listeners to watch Neander Jin on YouTube and then go to IMDb and rate it accordingly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think if the podcast does nothing else, I think as a service to humanity, getting more ratings on the Neander Jin IMDb page would be enough.
Yes,
I suppose each of us could rate it, and since there's only 33 actual ratings, just the three of us rating it could have a statistical effect there.
We should do that. Sorry, Kim, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
Oh, it's not podcast related. I was just going to ask those books behind you with the plesiosaur that's throughout the different spines. Like all the spines go together to make a plesiosaur skeleton. What are those books?
Yeah. So those are the newsletter of the Paleontological Association.
Oh, wow. That's such a good idea. That's so pretty. It makes it so
it's really nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's a really nice. I would recommend if you're interested in paleo stuff, become a member of the Paleontological Association. They do reviews of books. They kind of interview their members, talk about what funding streams are available, kind of cover posters and prizes that students have done and stuff. So it's really, really good.
Is it expensive to join?
No, not really. I think it's £20 or £30, something like that.
Okay. There's this there was one somebody on Facebook the other day put in a group for asking why some early career researchers, why more early career researchers aren't members of SAA, which is the Society of American Archaeologists. And I didn't write anything, but I really wanted to be like, listen, like, I'm early career, but I'm even middle career now, and I can't afford all of these membership association fees.
Yeah.
Right?
Some of them are really eye-watering.
Especially the big American ones that are hundreds, $250.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? And this is all coming out of unless you have like a ton of grants every year all the time. Yeah. But even then, most grants aren't going to want you to do that. So it's all coming out of your own pocket.
And it's always the tenured professors that are asking, why are people not joining this? Well,
I know.
Because we don't have security or wage that you do.
Yes.
And why were they asking? Was it just so they could get some more volunteers for editing and compositing and all these other kind of thankless tasks that they need people to do for free?
No, it was like I think it was the Women in Academia like support group. So I think it was someone just legitimately wondering what the issues were. But I was just in a grumpy mood, and I knew that if I started, it would just it would just unleash something. And other people are going to say it, so.
I only joined the Palace because they very generously awarded myself and a colleague a prize a couple of years back, and I went down for the prize giving, which was lovely. And I've kind of kept it up because I liked it. But the only
anything under $50 is fine, I think. It's just when it's
the only other kind of thing I subscribe to is the IUCN SSC Cat Specialist Group, which is only like 30 Swiss francs a year, which is very reasonable. It's like sub $40 kind of costs. But you get Cat News, which is where all the big cat news appears. And it's a beautiful, peer-reviewed, but very readable, and has nice full-color images of sexy cats.
Nice.
So that's it.
And for the listener, he means cats.
I do mean cats.
Yeah.
But I mean, I totally agree. Lots of these supposedly essential professional associations that you're supposed to join for career progression, they're just prohibitively expensive, and you get nothing for that except being asked for more of your time and expertise to give away for free.
Yep.
And that's how we end the episode.
On that happy note.
If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestoneage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca.
I feel like I'm coming down with something. I hope it's not mammoth bugs.